there has to be space to fail. There just has to be. If they feel like everything is performance and productivity and failure is the enemy, they are not interested.
Well, hey everyone, welcome to the Intentional Churches podcast. We are here to give you practical wisdom and insight into leading your church and helping you radically align your teams and your people back to the Great Commission. And so if you're a church leader who's brand new to Intentional Churches, or even if you've been listening to the podcast for a while and you're ready to take your next step with us, we've got a free resource to help you get started. So head over to intentionalchurches.com/start, and you can download 3 chapters of the Intentional Churches book for free. And these chapters just help provide a clear overview of what it means to be an intentional church, the Church OS Living Toolbox, and will kickstart your journey. We've got a great conversation in store today, and as always, I'm joined by my good friend, Doug Parks. What is up, Doug?
How's it going, Erin? And we've got a friendly face with us. Well, sometimes friendly.
Yes, yeah, we have a semi-friendly face with us, the one and only Drew Moore. What's up, Drew?
Hey, good to see you.
Good to see you too. Drew, tell us a little bit about yourself. For those of us that don't know who you are, what we should do is I should introduce you. That could be fun, but I'm not going to do that. More fun. I'll let you introduce yourself.
Yeah. I live in Las Vegas with my wife. We've been married 25 years. We got 4 kiddos. One's about to graduate high school, figuring out our oldest about to graduate high school. So that's a big rite of passage change for our family. I'm currently the lead pastor of Canyon Ridge Christian Church. We've been doing that. Been here about 13, but been doing the lead role about 6.5 years. We've just been exploring how our church could help launch movements of disciple makers.
That's great. Love it. Well, today we are jumping into kind of a fun conversation around staff, but particularly around young staff. Before we get to age, though, Drew, maybe just talk for a minute about how has the staff of Canyon Ridge transitioned under your leadership? Like, what has been the approach that you have taken, you've invited others to take alongside you to when you think about staffing and culture of staffing and all that over the last few years?
Yeah, sure. COVID obviously was a really big turning point for lots of people. And so I remember specifically a time reaching back maybe to 2018 where a young staff member who was a millennial at the time and one of the very few who was on staff, he literally came to me and said, where are all the millennials? Like, what are we going to do about this? Essentially, everyone was, maybe my age or older. And this was a time when I was beginning to transition into being lead pastor. And I was always struck by that question. I'm like, wow, you're right. And so it's really, really helpful question to think about. But when we moved out of kind of that challenging season of 2020, we really started to flatten our organization and be way more like multifaceted, collaborative, way less silo. Just a lot of transitions that we went through in that time that were pretty key and ended up, as we sit today, we've got more than half of our staff are millennials and Gen Z. And so in that short of a time, just a huge transition. And so probably got 4 or 5 kind of trigger points that are like, hey, these are things that shifted that I think helped create that context.
That's great. Yeah, why don't you just give us the numbers? I'm pretty sure you have them. What are the numbers in terms of the way the generations are dispersed across the staff?
Yeah, we've got like 6 or 7 boomers and 6 or 7 Gen Z. And then we've got like low 20s in Gen X and low to mid 20s in millennials. And even a number of our Gen Xers are kind of on that low end of Gen X with the the analog childhood, digital young adulthood, Zennials, some people call us along the way. But yeah, like I said, there's some big shifts that helped us do that. We were 3 campuses going into COVID. We came out as 1 campus. We were really very attractional oriented, come and see mindset and a very disciple making movement focus coming out. We were pretty hierarchical and siloed going in, and we were much flatter and collaborative coming out. And we were also a little pretty expertise oriented going in and very experimental, exploratory coming out. And I think all of those things, as I reflect on the last 5 years in particular, those shifts have just been really attractive and helpful, I think, to younger staff, sometimes a little challenging to staff who had developed expertise in a different model. And so pretty big swing.
That's incredible, man. I did not know those stats. And there's so much I could unpack. We could unpack just for you reeling those off. And in order to keep you from having a little PTSD, we're not going to deal with necessarily how you got here, the transitionary periods. But can you talk about, like, one of the burning questions I find everywhere I go now, everywhere I go, where are future staff coming from, church staff? Where have you found that great of a number of Gen Zer and millennials to serve in church, man? Where did they come from?
Honestly, I think as we try to raise the responsibility that we ask of people in our church, we find a lot of them from among our church. We find some who are young professionals in the community who offer the very best of who they are at our church and realize, oh, there's actually a space for me. We exhibit like a high amount of flexibility in the roles as we define them. So that actually creates a wider net into which we can bring them. So, Erin helps oversee our staff here at Canyon Ridge. What else would you say, Erin, is important about helping them find their way on the staff?
I would echo what Drew has said. If we are really looking within, because we are a church that, staff or not, volunteer wherever you find yourself. Like, the expectation is that you will contribute, and not just that you'll, be a warm body filling a seat or filling a role or doing something mindless, but that you will bring like the best of who you are. And so we call that out of volunteers. We call that out of all of our teams. Of That's a common practice for us. And so I think people get a taste of getting to contribute in a meaningful way. And then everything we do is we try to keep it super relational. So we're not just trying to plug people into funnels or into email campaigns or whatever. While those things have their time and place, young people are showing up to a place like this. They're making a meaningful contribution. Then someone is seeing that meaningful contribution, calling it out in them, helping develop them, and walking them into the next thing. And so I can't even tell you how many people, especially on that younger end that Drew just listed, of those people started in our church and then have since rolled onto our staff, but they didn't come here to be on our staff.
I know I'm not supposed to be the main interviewer here, but I want to ask even a step back from that, because I know a lot of our listeners don't actually have Gen Z and millennials showing up to their church. So how did that happen?
I think they're hand in glove, honestly, as we have invited contribution. This is a really important word. Like Erin was talking about it from the proactive side. Like we're constantly saying, don't just be a recipient, be a contributor. We're expecting contribution from everyone. On the flip side is we show up and meet everyone with the expectation they have a contribution that we need and that we're missing out if they don't bring it. And so this kind of, hey, you're kind of expected to contribute, but we're expecting you have like a really meaningful and helpful contribution, I think is just so attractive to these generations. They feel seen, they feel supported. I think, like Erin was saying, every environment that we create, everyone has something to bring. There's very little like sit and listen or we're going to train you. It's let's explore this together, which allows so much good from everyone to rise up. We get to see it, we get to identify it, affirm it, and people just run in that direction. And so it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Maybe let's shift the conversation just a little bit. What are some of the challenges you think, Drew? We can start with challenges and then go to advantages, but challenges of having a very young staff. We are a very young staff. What are some of the challenges that we're finding along the way with that?
Honestly, the first thing I thought of is the challenge I have working with young staff, and that is I just am so inspired and energized and love them so much. I just kind of forget what they don't know. And then I'm kind of surprised when there's these gaps. And then I'm like, oh, yeah, you really haven't been in the workforce that long. Or you haven't been in a professional role for a very long time. You wouldn't know those things yet. And so that's one of the biggest challenges, is just kind of living with this high level of belief and expectation while at the same time just remembering some things take time and you just can't microwave them. You got to have some patience for those. I think about adversity. That's another thing you just can't know until you experience it, is how do you endure and stay in adversity? That's a sign of maturity for anyone. It's not necessarily an age thing. It's just a time thing. And so a lot of young people at times haven't experienced high levels of adversity or enduring adversity. And so like trying to find ways to really stand with them without becoming frustrated, without making it first about performance, and really standing with them. I see you do a great job of that, Erin. I see Mitch and others on our staff do a great job of that in particular. Those are some. Maybe the last one would be, I think there's this delicate dance of like initiative and invitation. One of our young staff was talking to me about this. That young staff, they have a hard time sometimes knowing when to take initiative. And then older staff sometimes are like, you're taking too much or you're not taking enough, but they don't know. Sometimes our young staff don't know, have I been invited? Am I usurping? So there's just this dance that we've had to kind of learn along the way. And we honestly have to learn it a little bit more with each person. Everybody kind of walks into that differently. What stirs up in you when you think about that, Erin?
Yeah, I would echo a lot of what you've said. I would say the younger generations, they want to work, but not in the way that the generations before them did. And so that has just proven difficult. They just have a completely, I shouldn't even say they, I should say we, because I'm a millennial, have a completely different framework for our work and how we think about work. And a typical 9 to 5 office job just isn't really like all that compelling to these generations. And so finding ways to fit the work that we do in such a way that it would be attractive to Gen Z and millennials and keep them on their toes. I was just sharing with Drew that if boomers and Gen X wanted to just punch a clock for 35 years in the same role and be faithful and consistent and serve the organization and all of that, Gen Z and millennials are the opposite. They do not want to do that, And so finding our way in that as an organization, I think has been interesting.
What I'm hearing and I've experienced with our young staff is this tension between productivity and creation. So young staff love to be creative, where sometimes our previous generations think a lot about producing. It's production and creativity is this. We're often looking through slightly different lenses at the same idea. Neither generation wants to get nothing done or do nothing meaningful. It's just the way they think about it is a little bit different.
Challenges of leading younger staff. If our listeners have younger staff in their midst, I'm sure everybody's trying to figure this out, but like practically, are there things that you all are doing to deal with some of those tensions or differentiations that you're stumbling onto as you lead a younger staff? Like, do you do a training? Do you guys have a formalized resident mentoring program? What do you guys do practically for this?
Yeah, we have several layers of development that are very much on purpose. And I think sometimes when people think about development, they think about preparing a person to do a role. And we just don't really think about development that way. We think about developing the person and assuming that will have the right implications on role. How do we unleash someone's contribution? What's hindering their contribution? What would escalate or catalyze their contribution? So the kinds of things that we do is we do development days as staff that use lots of liberating structures where there's almost never sit and listen. It's all participation. It's all conversation. It's all collaborative. Liberating structures is something that we use all the time. So everybody has skin in the game. And if it's not great, it's everybody's fault, not the leader's fault. And so everything is built that way with a development mindset. In fact, as I asked our younger staff, what do you value? That's one of the biggest things. So we do proactive development. We also do reactive development. The way we do this, a lot of people will think about evaluating young staff. We actually think about reflecting with young staff to develop. And our young staff have just in spades appreciated this. We let them be the first primary evaluator, like a simple practical tool, like a wins evaluation. We let them answer all the questions and we just ask the questions. Like you could read it off a card. What did you think you did well? And you just keep prodding, make them celebrate and celebrate with them. And then what did you learn that'll help you improve? Which is not a condemning question. It's a developmental question. And they think about all of that. And almost always we don't have a lot to add to the list. And just invites conversation that they're initiating, developing, and then, slightly different. What would you do differently next time? So simple tools in reaction. We are always reflecting. There's almost never a time we don't reflect immediately and then reflect in a delayed way so that we learn everything we can from every experiment. Then we also utilize other staff. Like we have a former executive pastor who is kind of one-off. He's not their authority anymore. He comes in periodically and does developmental sessions with our young staff, challenging them in maturity and other things. And then we have kind of a couple of gurus that we point people to when they need some specific development or experiencing some real challenges, who are like former missionaries, other great folks in our church who are just like, hey, help them unlock this part of them.
what you're hitting on, of course, I love. If you're new to IC, if you're a newer listener or newer to IC, what Drew is talking about is the premise of this entire IC community, and that is be curious, become and practice becoming a great question asker, and you will unlock something awesome in somebody through the power of guided self-discovery. Like when somebody discovers it for themselves, it actually is teaching thinking, and not in the traditional way churches do it or church leaders do it, which is usually content dump downloads, you know.
Yeah, or I think for a long time we felt like pressure that uplines had to have all the answers and had to be the primary developers of those within their care, and then that taught everyone within their kind of span of care or hierarchical structure that that's the person they go to. Well, that's not always the case. That's crazy talk. We got contribution all across the staff, and so we've got a lot of cross-functional things going on. We reach for contribution from lots of directions, and we rarely do one-to-one development. One-to-one development has such a low return compared to 3, 4, 5 peers together who are speaking into one another, challenging one another, a solid facilitator asking questions like you're talking about that actually unleash the best of them and kind of confront them with themselves, but also offer support to become who they also want to become, not just who you might want them to become. Those are rich environments for like shared development.
Yeah. Drew, what would you say are some of the advantages? We've talked about some of the challenge and some of the, development required, but how are you thinking about and seeing the advantages of having such a young staff?
Well, I think Doug mentioned one earlier. We have a ton of young people around our church these days, and I think that's because they see the opportunities afforded young leaders. And those young leaders are translating all the greatest values of our church in ways that, some of us in older generations couldn't do in the same way. So that's one advantage is youthfulness begets youthfulness, which is really cool. On top of that, as a former youth pastor, I just love working with younger people. They're just full of energy. It's a blast. It's hilarious. If you can, like deal with some of the mishaps along the way in healthy ways and endure those, the upsides are so much better. And I just love that we live in a space together with these staff where they're just coming up with stuff I just never would have thought of. Some of it's not great. Let's just be honest.
What's the best not great one?
And some of it's really, really awesome, and so no, there's not really that much not great. I think sometimes they're just not thinking out ahead far enough to for people not in their stage of life, they have a challenge sometimes thinking about what does it take for a person in another season of life to do the thing they're hoping that they'll do or be a part of the thing they're hoping to be a part of. They just like all of us, they make assumptions too much that people are a lot like them, and not every age group is like them.
Can you either of you think of one or two like really cool innovations or development things that a younger staff members come up with recently where you were just like kind of floored by it? And
I think of several. There's just a ton of young adults who are jumping into a couple of were trained to do discovery Bible study well, which is its own kind of innovation. A young staff member with very unimpressive numbers began training some people to do some things. Like no one would write an article about the numbers, but the impact that it's starting to have slowly as it grows is next level. And then one of those folks and trainees not only are training others, but they've started their own podcast regarding discovery Bible study. There's a guy who started he's got this whole line dancing ministry thing going on. They're outgrowing the sports book in which they do discovery Bible study. Yeah. And they've ended up kind of drawing in this other gathering of young adults in our city who is kind of about singleness and other stuff, but you just never quite know. Like I hear it come back to me like, I don't know what you're talking about. But that sounds awesome.
Did you just say a Bible study is happening in a sports book in Las Vegas?
Absolutely.
It doesn't fit. All of the locals are like ticked off that these guys are talking about the Bible and they're just trying to win a bet.
What in the world?
It's great. Oh, I thought of a total fail. Listen, I'm in my mid 40s now, and I got to rock readers from that every now and then. And our comms team, which is pretty young, produced some copy that was like you didn't have a chance in the world of reading that if you were any day over 35. Like it just,
They did it on purpose.
yeah, I was like, there were 75-year-olds in our church trying to do this Mad Lib that was like 6-point font. And I'm like, so many things are going wrong right now.
Oh, it's so funny. Well,
They're a
Drew, you're
blast.
the one that brought up your own age. So while we're on the topic,
Oh, great.
it's just
Yeah,
a nice
I'm glad we could
transition.
camp here for a moment. Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to camp out here for just a minute. Because you're a Gen Xer and leading a staff of, some other Gen Xers, some boomers, but also a lot of millennials and Gen Z. So what are you learning about leadership of a younger staff? And maybe how would you help our listeners who might be in a similar season as you trying to lead a younger staff? What are you learning?
Can I give a
that?
quick observation before that kind of fits within this context? And that is, I'm noticing because I'm a Gen Xer, as our listeners who've been around know, because I rip on us all the time. But there is, I feel like there is emerging a differentiation. If you're an older Gen Xer, you're the parents of some of these staff members that are now coming on our church staff. And I find that if you're an older Gen Xer, and I wonder if others are seeing this or I'm just having hallucinations, that we were the great deconstructionists. Like it was like our lot in life to deconstruct everything, including a lot of my contemporaries, parts of their faith, and then what does that then produce if a child is growing up in a deconstructionist environment? It's just, I'm in this curious season right now because I think, Drew, you're a little more younger, right? Toward millennial.
Yeah. I mean, I'm like 2 years within 2 years of the cutoff.
Yeah. So anyway, as you're answering, I'd love any of your thoughts around that as you're thinking about this thing, man, because it's fascinating to me.
Yeah, I was encouraged once. I had a friend who was also stepping into a lead role at a large church, and he just characterized it really well. He said, "We kind of get to be the bridge between some generations." And honestly, as I listen to the younger generation, they really want access to all the wisdom and support of generations who have gone before. They're really not resistant in any way. In fact, the ones that I talk to around here are very frustrated at any of those like divisions, and even without blaming anyone, the hardship of getting translated from one generation to the other. Sure, generations get frustrated with one another. That's a tale as old as time. But there actually is real hunger and desire for that, which I think is really cool. When I think about what I've learned, several things come to mind. I was sitting in another organization in town that's trying to hand off some things to the next generation, and they were really organizationally focused. They just had in mind what they were trying to do and the way the organization was trying to do it. And I just really don't think the next generation is that interested in that. The organization is just not going to be satisfying. It's got to be mission. It's got to be the thing beyond the organization. The organization is little more than a vehicle in a context in which that can happen. And honestly, for young people, as I experience them, they are as concerned, and you can like it or not, and I don't think there's anything wrong with it. They're as concerned with who they will become in the context of the workplace as they are with the things that they'll get done. They are far more about who they're becoming and how will this place, this context, this time help them become who God's calling them to become than it is just about getting done. Again, it's about creativity and not productivity. They're not anti-productivity. They want to get after it. They want to make a difference. They want change. They're about it. The way they're going to go about it can't be contained completely in a job description or an organizational mission statement. And so we've got which is one of the things I think that we tripped on, honestly, along the way in thinking about contribution way more than role. When we talk to young people and young leaders, what is your contribution? What is the thing God is unleashing in the world because of you? The church needs it. And then how does this organization, how does this season and this role do that as best as possible? When I think across the landscape of our young leaders, the number of job descriptions they have had in their short tenure here is substantial. We're adapting all the time to who they are becoming and just holding it with really wide open hands as much as possible. And they are energized by that. Does that sound right to you, Erin? Are you experiencing that with young staff?
Yeah, I mean, I personally have had like 5 different roles in my tenure at Cambridge. So, I can speak to that. Yeah. And we're trying to, it's not just about climbing some ladder to get to the next job. It's about molding role to fit someone's contribution along the way. Because we're not, like you said earlier, we're not thinking about hierarchy. So it's not about, oh, I'm trying to move up in my influence or my whatever. It's not about that. It's like, no, I want to keep learning what it means to be the best version of myself and to say the best yeses I can. And so the question when young leaders come to me all the time of like, I just sense that maybe my job isn't quite lining up. It's like, okay, well, we have to find, your greatest contribution and desire and how that collides with the organization and how those things come together in a really powerful way. And it doesn't mean that they always do. And then we have to have those conversations. But there's always space to explore. I think one of the
That's a
coolest.
big word, though, I think, is exploration. Like, we're not bringing answers and trying to sell young staff on a role. We're inviting them to bring their contribution and exploring and willing to experiment and find our way toward the best version of their contribution for our church. Sorry to interrupt you, Erin. Our staff use that word all the time, young staff in particular. Can we explore? And then failure is a big theme too, but go ahead, Erin.
Yeah, I think just one of the coolest things that if we were to just get practical for a second that we have done that I was on the receiving end of, and then I've gotten to be on the other end of it is, when a young staff member is kind of exploring maybe what God has next for them, maybe they feel like their contribution is shifting or something. We have worked really hard to surround that staff member with key people in their life across generations. So people older than them, peers, bosses, mentors, whoever, to listen to God individually on behalf of that person, and then to come together in a room and listen together with some key questions like, what is the key contribution that this person brings? When this person walks into a room, what comes with them? What are their greatest strengths? What are their greatest weaknesses? What might that say to us about what God is saying about their vocation and their calling? And trying to have that level of conversation and really trying to spend, 90 minutes to 2 hours of intentional time speaking life and truth over that young leader. And so that young leader walks away with far more clarity and has listened to God on their own and invited others to listen to God on their behalf. And so we're experiencing this, that even if that doesn't end up being a job in our organization, a new job or a certain sort of title or whatever, that they walk away with way more clarity about how people see them and what they have to offer the kingdom of God. And that just sets them up so much better for where they might go next. And so I would just say for our listeners, practically speaking, I was on the receiving end of that. I don't know that I would be in the role I'm in as executive pastor right now if that hadn't happened for me. And it's really time-wise, a few hours of someone's time, of a few people on your staff's time to invest that back into a young leader. And I think the ripple effect of that is just substantial.
Yeah, absolutely. Corporate discernment, and it is just it's such a generous gift to offer young staff to say, let's take consequences of your current job off the table. And we're just going to offer you the very best prayer, attentiveness, reflection, and conversation to just give them a gift to say, take this, and now let's go back and let's apply it to the organizational conversation. To be able to do that, though, there's like two other quick learnings I'd offer. One, the organization has to slow down. When we were in a hurry, we were bad at development. And we just needed people to fill roles and get it done and not slow us down with a lack of performance or bad ideas. And man, if we're in a hurry, we will not do development well. And while there's an urgency, I would say, in young people to do things that are meaningful, relationship doesn't happen in a hurry. Development doesn't happen in a hurry. And the kind of unleashing we hope to do of young people, there just has to be margin, which is what happens with these discernments. It takes some time. It only takes 90 minutes, 2 hours for the meeting, but the couple weeks it takes to pray and reflect ahead of time, the week or two it takes to give that person time to reflect before we start making organizational choices, there's a month, easy, and when you're in a hurry, that doesn't work. The other thing is, I think one of the biggest themes I can't not offer, because our young staff said it over and over to me, is there has to be space to fail. There just has to be. If they feel like everything is performance and productivity and failure is the enemy, they are not interested. And I respect that, because we've got all kinds of Gen Xers and olders talking about fail fast and all this and that. They often talk about it like an idea. But when you actually make space to do that and live well, reflect well, and then offer the kind of support like Erin is describing, Rather than accountability, offer support. How do I help you do what you're trying to do, rather than just evaluate from a distance what you tried to do? This game changer for young people. One of our young staff said it this way. He says, what young people need is for us to meet them where they are and help them answer the questions that they are already asking. And that's what development, that's what contribution, that's what this kind of discernment actually does. And young people here seem to be really well served by it.
Drew, I want you to define this church buzzword for us. Multiplication. It gets used all the time. What does multiplication mean to you in context of the gospel?
It is taking whatever we have been handed and handing it to others in essentially the same way. In fact, the same young man that I just quoted a moment ago, he was talking about this. Young people need us to actually multiply things into them, which you need a decent process for that. You have to model it, then you need to let them assist while you're doing it, then you watch them and offer them feedback, and then maybe they're launched and ready to go. And it takes lots of reps to do all of that, which always includes failure. It takes time and it goes slow. So particularly when I was asking him about, how do we reach young leaders who are not staff members, who are just among our churches or in our city, people who are far from God but close to us? This is what he was saying. Answer the questions that they're already asking, but do it in a way that equips them to help their friends help their friends answer it. So a young staff member invests in another, but he does so in a way that person could turn around and do the exact same thing, so that person could turn around and do the exact same thing. Not in an impressive, you need me kind of way, but I'm giving you everything you need to do with others what I've done with you. And you're going to give somebody everything they need to do with others what they've done with you. So this is how we think about multiplication, not rapid growth, not the way we think about lots of people being added to the church, or not, movement's another word that has all kinds of definitions that goes with it. But taking the time to equip somebody to actually do the thing that you did with them, with someone else, in the same way that you did it with them.
Yeah, the multiplication thing, somehow we've just come to know it almost subconsciously as multiplying of the organization or the institution or the program or the what, fill in the blank. And love you talking about it at that granular level. And so what I wanted to ask you both is, so how should church leaders be thinking differently about multiplication, especially around the idea of relational evangelism? Like, what do these generations need equipped in? How do they need to be equipped to be active in the adventure of relational evangelism in their life to the ends of multiplication, the way you defined it?
I think it's all the same ingredients. It's just not on a staff level. When you start taking simple tools and actually expect people, like actually hand them to people in ways that they can immediately try them and afford them the space to fail, and then reflect quickly and meaningfully in a supportive way, all of a sudden you are starting to plant the seeds of multiplication. So this is what's happening among the young people of our church. We've handed them simple tools like Discovery Bible Study, like 15-second transformation stories that help engage people in conversation about spiritual things. And then actually trained them and continued showing up in their lives, checking in on how they're doing that, building that into our teams. But they're so simple, there's nothing impressive about it that requires the originator of it to be there for the next generation to grow. And so that's why there's a DBS podcast out there with some young people whose names I don't even know. It's why there's a sports book filled up over in the corner of town. It's why, because they've been handed something that they actually felt supported to learn how to do, encouraged, and not held accountable, but followed up with to see if they actually used it, and then coached when it didn't go exactly the way they thought it would the first time. These simple things are how that works. And so it's Will Gadara. The way you do one thing is the way you do everything. So the way we've approached young staff is the same way we approach young adults, which is the same way that we equip people to share their faith in meaningful ways and end up in powerful conversations. Erin, what would you add to that?
Yeah, the other thing I would say is I think as the church at large, we have had, particularly in the American church, such high expectations of what it means to be a quote unquote leader. And so if I'm going to be a small group leader, it's almost unattainable to be honest, in some spaces. And so I think that's a turnoff, especially to young adults who feel like I could never meet those expectations, or I'm still in process, and it's particularly a turnoff to people who are new followers of Jesus who are like, I could not possibly meet these expectations. And
Yeah,
so,
church leaders, you hear it like this in church leaders. I don't know if that person's ready.
yeah.
Well, when you say that, they're saying it 10 times louder, and we've just taken so much agency away. You're
Yeah.
spot on, Aaron. Keep going.
So I would say, like, who gets to be quote unquote allowed to carry the truth of the gospel forward? Is it only people whoever we is, church leadership, quote unquote, have cleared to be leaders and deemed allowed? Sorry, I'm getting spicy, Doug. But I think this is part of the problem is we have set a ceiling, and then we wonder why we can't find young adults that want to carry it forward because they feel like they can't possibly meet the expectations of the organization. Instead, we have 50 young adults at a sports book doing line dancing and then studying the gospel. And there is not one clear leader. There's a facilitator who sends out a text to let them know what time, but different people lead the discussion, different people chime in, and there is no quote unquote expectation of a leader, but instead each of them sharing the good that they've received with the people around them. And by the way, they are not accountable to the organization for any of that. We're just here to support, and as they need resource or help or whatever, we're happy to offer it.
So, but there'd be some of our listeners who would be challenging you, I think, with what about spiritual responsibility?
Totally.
What about the spiritual responsibility of the pastorate and leaders and elders? And I hear this argument all the time. Someday we'll have to stand before Jesus and give an answer for the way we led the church. Like, what would either of you say on this?
Drew, go for it.
I was hoping to get more spiciness from you.
Yeah, I was going to say, what's our spice level here? Man, I would say that I am as concerned about being accountable for not unleashing the priesthood of all believers as I am for the messes that are created by the people unleashed. The whole New Testament is full of Paul circling back to messes from people who were unleashed, all the letters in the New Testament. So I'm just like, I don't know when we got so concerned about this, and I think we need to ask some really honest questions of, are we being relational enough that we have like close enough contact with people to do some real reflecting and follow up? Are we going slow enough, or are we just trusting systems to do the oversight for us that are impersonal? Because it's messy to develop people. It will always make messes. It always has. But the other side is, let's wait until they're ready and let's dub people with authority. It's not priesthood of all believers. It's robbing people of agency and authority. It's keeping all of like the influence and things collected at the center with a few. And honestly, I think we need to, if I'm being really spicy, I think we need to spend some real time in repentance and asking God, what is it that serves us about holding all of that authority in the middle? It's a noble answer to say, hey, one day we'll stand before God and be accountable for what happened. One, I think that's overstated. Two, I think, man, there's something we get from that too, that I think we have to be really honest about. Those who are at the center receive something from being the dubbers of authority and the releaser of leaders. Instead, what if we stood behind everybody to lead at capacity the way that God is inviting them to? I think we'll be equally accountable in both directions. I think we gotta course correct in the other way.
This is good. I like the spiciness, you two. Feels like we're at a Thai restaurant.
All right.
We're running out of time, but Drew, I would just ask any other thoughts or reflections you have around, the next generation, around leading the next generation, anything that just feels important that you would, or even just practical insight you would offer to our listeners back for people who are trying to lead younger generations or even hoping one day to be able to, like anything in that realm that you would just offer that has just felt important as you've reflected in preparation for this.
Yeah. A couple of things that I've heard from our young leaders is they have been so helped by different mental models. They don't want to be told what to think. They want to be helped in how to think. So some simple examples like polarity management, not getting stuck in either or thinking, like we talked about earlier, developmental mindsets and wins evaluations help people know how to think. You get to model how to think rather than just telling them what to think. It's a subtle shift, but it's so important. Similar, I would say, from one generation to another, I think there's a really honorable and helpful desire in those who have accumulated hard-fought wisdom in their life to hand it to the next generation. Unfortunately, it often we're handing them like instruction manuals when we need to be handing them raw materials to let them build what they're going to build. So backing up from like methods and specifics to like values, mental models, relational insight, these kind of things that serve younger generations as raw materials to do the thing that they and God together want to do. How do we stand in like behind them, holding them up and supplying them? I'm thinking about when my dad was a carpenter, and I would be the guy who would hand him tools. Let's have the older generation be that for a younger generation, to hand some tools with wisdom, rather than the people who are up front barking orders, telling them what to do and how to do it. It's a subtle shift, but it's so important. So I think those things are really huge. I do think we just have to do a way better job of like trusting the Spirit in them, like the Spirit alive in them who has gifted them. Yeah, there's some clumsiness in the execution, and yeah, there's some hard-fought wisdom not yet found. But if we'll stand behind and offer that in some real ways to hold them up and press them forward, it's the thing we always wanted to. And they, man, I just think one of the most important things in the gospel is the priesthood of all believers. That the Spirit's alive in us and among us, not as individuals, but in the corporate sense, in the church. And man, we need everybody's contribution. A young lady on our staff said it that way. She's like, man, the real picture of the future is when generations stand together and their contributions are unleashed in one another's presence. That's really the picture. It's not either or. It's not us against them. It's not right or wrong one way or the other. It's what's the best of all of us, and how do we bring as much of that and create space at the table as possible.
Thanks, Drew. Doug, anything else you would offer just from the national level or what you're hearing in this conversation that feels pertinent to our listeners?
I don't really have much to add. I mean, you guys are out on the front end of the exploration that's happened across a ton of churches right now of like, how do we hand this off? And I'm watching even some of the numbers I saw come in today. I'm like, holy cow, something's cooking. And it is a very different environment that the churches who are being led by younger staff, more and more younger staff, it's a very different environment than I led a church in for a number of years. And I think it's a good thing. I think it's what's required in order to reach the culture that exists for today's world. And what the Boomer and Gen X church was what it needed to be for that moment, you know? So anyway.
That's great. Well, I would just like to publicly thank you two Gen Xers for gracing me, a millennial, with your presence today.
You're welcome.
Wow.
You're welcome.
I have learned so
great.
much from the next generation, the older generation, offering me practical wisdom and insight back into my life. No, but for real, thanks for your insight. It's been a gift to be on the journey, and with both of you who have invested so deeply in me and in others in the upcoming generation. To our listeners, thanks for listening to the Intentional Churches podcast. If this podcast has been helpful to you, please, please, please just leave us a rating and a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. This just helps us tremendously as we grow and try to reach new leaders. And remember, if you're ready to take your next step with Intentional Churches, you can download 3 chapters of the Intentional Churches book for free at intentionalchurches.com/start. We'll see you next time.